All righty, I'm live. I actually had to jump up and turn the lights on myself because my wife isn't around today to help me with the technical stuff. Howdy, everybody. And, there are no good thumbnails. And again, wife's out of town, so I'm doing the technical stuff by myself. If somebody wanted to chime in, let me know that there's somebody watching. It would be nice. But if we're being honest, I don't mind talking to myself for a little while. I spent years sitting in a cell thinking out loud, so I got time. Most of the stories that I've told recently, they've been about high desert. High desert was a scary place to do time, but I did time at a couple of places. County jail, Mendocino County Jail, San Quentin. I went to CSATF, that's the Substance Abuse Treatment Facility in Corcoran, California. Interesting. Hey, what's up, Flaherty and John? Good to know you guys can see me. Happy Tuesday. So, look, I know the picture quality sucks and the audio quality sucks. I'm working on getting my mic and my camera hooked up to my computer. It's a process. Give me another week or two, and this is going to look clean, right, guys? Hey, what's up, Brian? I'm talking about SATF at the moment, which, again, is the Substance Abuse Treatment Facility. They're in Corcoran, California. This was an interesting place to do time because everybody knows about the Corcoran CHOW. That's where all the serious gang members are. And the PHU is where the guys like Charles Manson and, until recently, Sirhan were. Because I was at the prison across the way, I'd interact with a lot of cops that worked back there in the CHOW or the PHU when they were doing their weekends or their RDOs. And it was interesting getting secondhand stories about the way stuff worked back there. I was never back there myself, but it's like a whole different world from what I understand. Hey, Matthew, thank you for checking in. Jeez. I don't know if anyone knows, but I'm here in Reno, and there's a fire in Tahoe. Air quality is just terrible. Smoke, my eyes are killing me. Man, my prayers are with anybody who's fleeing the Caldor fire. And if you're near the fire, this is a terrifying and unpredictable one. Please get out of that little valley right there. People could get caught. It could be nasty. Jason McGinnis, what's up, Jewy? That's a friend of mine from way back. He's a good dude. And Corey, whoa, fresh cut. How's it going, channel? Hope your family's safe and sound. Yeah, I had to get cleaned up, man. I was starting to look like a hobo. Which, it's not that I mind, but at the other hand, I'm trying to present an image here. Jeez, with the smoke. Do you hear me trying to clear my throat? Hey, Jeff, what's up? I recall talking to one officer who worked back in the PHU who interacted regularly with Charles Manson. I know he's dead now, but Manson's stories were the thing. Everybody was always interested whenever somebody had a Charles Manson story they could tell. I don't get the fascination myself. From all I could tell, he was a creepy little J-cat. But the female officer, her name was Carol. She was a nice lady. She told me that the first time she worked in the PHU, he slid a postcard that he had filled out, happy birthday to, and then just left this part blank from your friend Charles Manson. He'd signed it, he slid it out the door, and he told her, here, honey, go get yourself a house or something like that. I don't know what he thought his signature was worth, but that just shows the level of delusion you can deal with and, back way in the back. I've heard the fire is a result of no controlled burns of the Push Your Green agenda. If we're being honest, John, I have no idea. I just worry about the people losing their homes and their livelihood. I know if I'm coughing on the smoke, there's somebody else, and that's their house that's burning, but I'm coughing on that smoke. It's a nasty thought. I wanted to thank everybody for checking in on this regularly Tuesday Night Live program, I guess. I'm still getting used to exactly how this works, so this is going to be a shorter live stream. I'm shooting for a half hour, but I've got children in the background I'm keeping half an eye on, so it could end abruptly if I'm being honest, and I apologize for the unprofessionalism on that. Like I said, this is the second scheduled live stream. A couple of weeks, this is going to look clean. For now, we're just settling in. I'll be just fine, John. Thanks for worrying about me. Reno is far enough from the fires. I just worry about the people fleeing. I know that we have a number of shelters and emergency services set up for people who are coming from Tahoe. And I was just in Tahoe a couple of weeks ago. What a beautiful place. And gosh, I guess I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks again. And I hate to think of the damage that's going to be done to it. SATF, the Substance Abuse Treatment Facility, which I guess that's what I'll talk about, unless anybody has a question about doing time. You're curious, you want to know, and I can talk. But SATF is part of the Corcoran Prison Complex. People don't realize this, but Corcoran Prison, and it's 2 prisons, and they're actually connected. It's the largest prison complex in the world. Anywhere else in the world, from what I understand, that little chunk of prison with, 10,000 inmates, give or take, is by area the largest prison complex in the world. So there is a lot of staff that carries over from one side of the prison to the next. And I interacted with a lot of officers who worked in Corcoran at the CHOW and the PHU. Hey, Camp Stories with JR. Thanks, man. Christopher Mack, you're interested in how doing time with Powder was? If we're being honest, he and I were never close. I mean, like, I ate dinner with him most nights because Stu and Scooby, the 2 guys that lived right next to me in my cellie, they were good with Powder, and Powder only lived a couple of bunks down. You tend to eat dinner with the same people, eat breakfast with the same people, because there's 4 chairs to a table, and you want to sit with the people you know, so you stand in line and eat with the same people every day. I ate a lot of meals with Powder, and he seemed like a good dude, but he and I were doing a really different time. He was concerned with the politics. He came out just pressed and cut, and he'd get his 1,000 burpees in the corner, and he'd come over and he'd talk some racist gibberish that I didn't really buy into. He and I had very different outlooks on life. He couldn't go more than a couple of sentences without a racial slur. And I'm not going to toss him out there, but they were nasty words. Things people don't say in polite company. With that exception, if we can put like the race gang thing to the side, I had a lot of respect for Powder. That man ran a tight program. He was disciplined. He was respectable. He seemed like the type of guy that you could bet he was going to act the same way tomorrow as he did yesterday. That type of consistency is invaluable, especially in prison. I suppose that, if the serious riot had kicked off, which I never experienced anything like that, thank goodness, Powder would have been a good dude to have at your back. He was fit. He seemed like he was quick. I watched a story stories written by a current prisoner where he was talking about 2 guys jumping him and he almost got stabbed in the heart. And my heart was thumping listening to his story, but I believe it. He was a quick dude. You'd see him doing a little shadow boxing or doing his burpees in the corner, and you could tell he could handle himself. Again, though, is that I was only there a couple of cells down from him. He was in 134 and I was in 129. So there's 5 cells, 129, 130, 131, etc. And he and I weren't close. I'm actually curious if he remembers me. I reached out to Tony from Stories from a Current Prisoner, and I'm curious to see if Powder does remember Aaron, that weird dude that lived a couple of cells down. I know he went on to get involved in politics and stuff like that, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. Continuing with SATF, I guess, is that... let me adjust this camera. Continuing with SATF, I guess, is I did years there, and I was in an interesting position. I was the head clerk on the yard there at ER. So warden occasionally, captains regularly, lieutenant surgeons all the time. I talked with administrative staff, and you'd be surprised how open they are with inmates about what's going on, what the plan for CDC is. To this day, I think I have a better insight on what they're doing with flipping the SNY yards and reintegrating. I feel like I have more insight into what's going on a decade after talking to some of the administrative staff on what CDCR's plan was than a lot of guys I hear talking about it today. CDC does have a plan. They're doing something. I may collaborate with stories written by a current prisoner. Tony's a busy dude, essentially. Some people may have noticed that his channel it could use some editing. It could use somebody that, watched all the videos and made sure they were in the right playlists and whatnot. That's not because he's not taking it seriously. That dude's working, from what I can tell. It's just that there's a lot of work to do. So I have reached out, and he said he's interested in doing an interview with me. Ideally, I'd love to call in one of these days whenever they're doing the live interviews with Powder. That'd be fun. Hey, what's up, Powder? But that's not this week. I've reached out to a couple of channels about doing videos about Shane Goldsby, or possibly even an interview with me. But if I'm being frank, my focus right now is trying to bring some attention to that case. For anyone who doesn't remember, Shane was celled up with the 70-year-old dude who had, there are some words I'm not supposed to use on YouTube. He had assaulted Shane's 10-year-old sister, videotaped it. Shane beat the dude to death, and I'm not defending that, but he got 24 years for it. And I'm just going to keep talking about that. 24 years is a lot of time for that crime. There has to be some mitigation. So I've reached out, and I am likely going to be doing some collaborations in the next couple of weeks. 30 to Life, perhaps, has said that they'd be interested in doing something with me, but he's a little busy right now, too. And long story short, you're going to see more of me. You're going to see more of me talking about that case in specific. But to be honest, anything anybody wants to talk about, an open book, as it were. Hi, Aaron inside chat. Oh, hey, Glenda. Yep, it's funny. Glenda was legitimately like one of the top 10 subscribers, like the first people to sign up. I think she was before my sister or my mom, honestly. And it was just on a random YouTube search, as I recall. What a fun coincidence. CSATF, where I was the head clerk, it was kind of a cool job because there was a big office area. The office area was the size of 4, maybe 5 cells. And whenever the administrative staff realized that I could do the job of the couple of people who were generally assigned there, I got to have the job by myself because they just didn't want to hire anybody to replace the people they fired as they got fired for stealing or for whatever. So every day, kitchen staff would deliver 4 trays for the 4 inmates that were supposed to work there. I'd get myself 4 meals to divvy out to my friends as I saw fit. I'd sweep, mop, do some paperwork, and I had a giant office with a TV set up. I had some dumb little video games on the computer. It was a ridiculously good setup for a dude doing time. And the administrative staff, they were all right with me there, in spite of the fact that I was in there for. I had been convicted of killing a pedophile. And I had expected that going to an SNY yard where there were a bunch of, pieces of garbage, I thought it was going to be awkward. I thought the staff was going to give me a speech. You better mind your P's and Q's or we'll put you back in the hole. And it turns out I think everybody hates pedophiles because as soon as I got there, I had a decent clerk job and no worries. I never had any problems there. Well, we're at about 13 minutes in. I am shooting for a half hour, but here on this side, I'm listening to my children out in the living room and making sure that everything is just fine because I'm a dad too, apparently, which is just the best and coolest job. I know there's a lot of parents out there, so it's not like I need to say being a dad is amazing, but I did all this time, and my children were conceived during conjugal visits, meaning I was incarcerated. My eldest is 10 years old, and I've only been out for 3 years. So I spent a lot of years just in a cage. And the thing that I wanted to do, the thing I wanted to do was go home, and my wife and my son, or later my sons, I wanted to take care of them. I don't know, it's what a man is for. How do you even express the concept of wanting to go home to care for your family? I don't take for granted one moment. I can't wait for this live stream to be over, and this is with all due deference to the people listening. Thank you for listening. After this, I'm going to go out and play with my boys, and that's going to be a heck of a lot more fun than this, regardless of what we're talking about. After I did my time at CSATF, and I was there for about, 5 years, they sent me to Chino. Some people may remember Chino. This is the building that was burnt. This was the prison yard that was burnt down back in, 2005 or so, I think. And it was neat to go there because these are all wooden structures and they had rebuilt them. The building that had burnt down, they had put it back up just the same as it was before, and they'd flipped the whole yard. I never talked to a single person who had been there when it burnt down. So I expect they put some kind of note in people's files they're not allowed to go back to that yard. But it was neat walking around thinking, wow, so this is where the big riot was a couple of years ago where the stinking prison burned down. That's news. You know, L-Train, they tried to give me a handle a couple of times, and I don't mean like people told me what my handle was, but you pick up a nickname. Nothing ever stuck, and the basic reason it never stuck is whenever I'd end up with a new crew or new people, I'd introduce myself as Aaron. I did have a couple. I got Chewbacca because I'm tall and hairy, and then later I got Jewbacca because I'm Jewish, tall and hairy. Whenever I was rolling up from the main line, I had an officer tell me about a week before. He said, "So Mendocino, you having problems on the yard? I hear things are crazy right now." He was walking me to a visit, and I looked over and went, "Mendocino? I'm from Mendocino County. How'd you know that, man?" And he went, No, man, I'm doing interviews. Like, we're walking you to a visit, but I'm talking to people. And I looked in your file. Your handle's Mendocino. He wasn't asking me. He was telling me my handle was Mendocino. And I had to tell him back, hey, boss, seriously, no one's ever called me that in my entire life. I don't know where you got that information, but somebody lied to you. It's a funny idea. I believe that was in my file. I believe there was some dude that was rolling up off the yard, and they told him, you better give us something. He said, but I don't want to go back on the yard. They're going to hurt me. And they said, well, we're going to put you in handcuffs, but we're not going to let you go SNY unless you give us some information. And he just started making stuff up. Oh, that dude in 129. Yeah, he's from Mendocino County. His handle's Mendocino. You keep an eye on him. I don't have a clue what else is in my confidential file. But what a scary thought that, just some random dude makes up a name for you and all of a sudden it's in there. For all I know, there was some dude actually named Mendocino on the yard. It was a quiet killer. Next thing I know, I'm going to be in there interviewing with squad. So Mendocino, we hear you're doing things on the yard. And I was always happy just to be Aaron. It's what's on the ID. It's easy enough, Oh, goodness, John, you would have called me the professor, and I do appreciate that, but I had an acquaintance named the professor, and I will be telling stories about him. He was there at SATF, and he was stinking brilliant, smart, disciplined. I thought we were friends for, at least a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, where, we were reasonably well acquainted. Then I found something out about him, and I'm going to go ahead and tell that story, and I'll explain what the detail is that made him one of the most repugnant individuals that I ever met. And I kind of wanted to scrub my skin off once I realized I called him a friend. But yeah, I couldn't go by the professor after meeting that dude. I think I'd grit my teeth every time somebody called me that. Wow, Mexico City. Bienvenidos, Dean Adams. Thank you. Christopher Mack, I'm trying to come up with some Phil Spector stories. I've only got about 3 or 4 more things that even touch on him. And then after that, it's going to be like, well, I ate breakfast with Phil. After that, it's going to be, I ate breakfast with Phil Spector. And, he likes Sara Lee cakes more than he likes the little chocolate fudge cakes they give us. He'll trade that anytime you want. I mean, I know some details about Phil, but I just can't imagine that's going to interest anybody who's not sitting at the table with him. Essentially, he was a raspy voice. He went, I'm angry at everybody. Raspy voiced little bully who stomped his foot, and if he didn't get his way, he'd stomp it a little louder and push forward like he was going to do something. And then he'd realize he didn't have bodyguards, or if he did, he was paying them a couple soups a day, so they weren't going to do anything. And he'd back down and go grumph in his cell. I will keep talking about him because I guess people are interested, but he seems like a pretty sad man who ended his life in a very sad way. And that's with the asterisk that from everything I understand, he was a musical genius. The wall of sound and his voice, anybody who hasn't listened to Phil Spector sing, just Google it. My goodness, the man had a voice. And then he lost it, and he became entitled and spoiled and lashed out. So I guess that's how life works whenever you don't have to work for things. You know, if you don't grow, you shrink. And boy, that man shrunk. It's all right, John. I hate typing on a phone too. Look, for all I know, before he came to prison, he was a decent guy. I have it on good authority he wasn't. I had one or two people reach out to me and say he was not well liked before his arrest. But I don't want to judge on anything outside of my personal experience. My personal experience is he was old, he was over medicated, and he was very angry that he was going to die in prison. His lawyers had sold to him that he wasn't going to die in prison. You wouldn't believe what that man spent on lawyers. Legitimately, 3 lawyers in the visiting room talking to him as he yells at them. And I know they all came from down south, LA or something. So that's flights, hotel rooms, hourly billing, just to sell him a story that they're going to get him out on an appeal. I just saw him in that visiting room 2, 3, 4 times over the course of the time that he was there. That adds up quick. Jesus. You know, Christopher Mack, there were actually a couple of New Yorkers that I met in the California prison system. Interestingly, sometimes people who are doing time in New York that they have problems, they end up back on the West Coast. They file an interstate compact. And, you know, even if you're touched up back east, you come over west and people don't know you anymore. So you'd run into some dude who had a thick Chicago accent who claiming he's from the Midwest. Well, the South, at least. I suppose Chicago's a little bit Midwest. I had one good friend who was from New York, actually, who, shocker, his name was New York. I suppose if I went and did time in another state, they'd call me California. I'll have to tell some stories about him. He was not just a smart guy. He'd been a little touched up with the Italians back east, and he had some interesting stories that he told me. Tommy. They do have conjugal visits in California, but it's a very hard system to get signed up in. Back whenever I was doing time, there were about 20 reasons that they would take your conjugal visits, and that was it. You'd never get them again. If you had any kind of institutional smuggling, they caught you with a bunch of drugs. If you had any crime against a minor, which sounds reasonable until you consider that this includes if you were a minor at the time of the crime, well, that's still a crime against a minor, and you're certainly not getting a family visit. Any domestic battery or domestic abuse, and again, if you had a victim who was related to you, that's going to be good enough regardless of the circumstances. Of course, even just a hint of a sex offense, and they won't let you go out there. And I'll sign off on that one right off the gate. If you hurt people by getting your rocks off out there, well, you sacrifice the privilege in prison as far as I'm concerned. They also didn't allow lifers to get their family visits. However, that has changed, as I understand it, since I've paroled. In the past couple of years, they've started giving lifers their family visits back, which is amazing. One of my cellies, a wolf, had been down for about 25 years. He's doing life without. In the 90s, he'd been getting family visits, and he said his relationship was fine. Him and his wife were solid. And then they took family visits from the lifers, and I was celled up with him, and I watched him trying to hold on to that relationship. But whenever you can't spend time alone with the person you love, especially life without, you're never getting out of prison. I understand. I get that it gets real hard to hold on to that for her and him. Christopher's from New York City. It's insane how different the prisons are. That's what I understand. 23andMe Death talks about the differences between East Coast and West Coast pens. As I understand it, the West Coast pens are just racist as hell, which I hated. And the East Coast pens are not. But the East Coast pens are pretty rapey, and the West Coast pens are not. I honestly don't know if I have to pick between racism and rapey, which one is more awful. I prefer to avoid both. I'm not telling you what it is. I was never there, but that's my understanding. I'm curious if you have any input. And then after I finished doing time at Chino, the last prison they transferred me to was Chowchilla. Chowchilla was interesting because it had been a women's prison for years and years. And California needed some place to put some men, so they flipped it. They decided it would be a men's prison. They moved all of the women out, all of the men in. That was a good place to do time. It was built so that you wouldn't be miserable, essentially. Every other pen I went to, they did things that just didn't seem like they were necessary. Like if they had 4 toilets right next to each other, there wouldn't be a partition. Nothing. You can't put a 3-foot partition just so, I ain't got to be right there next to the guy next to me. Chowchilla, they did exactly that. They did all the little things that won't hurt anything just to make the place a little more livable. The food was awesome until the women left. Whenever the last bus of women left Chowchilla, food went to crap, just like everywhere else in CDC. I don't know why women eat better than men in CDC, and I'm not even complaining, but it's definitely the case because I couldn't believe how good the food was from what I understand. How do the mafia guys survive in prison? I don't actually know, but it's my understanding that the Italian car back east runs pretty tight, and that in the right end, they are touched up with the cops, where they have a little bit of both. But I can't speak to any real depth on that. All I know is the same thing anybody else could know from watching the same YouTube channels some of y'all probably watch. Oh, don't worry about your bad English, Dean Adams. We're all just talking best as we can. If I had to talk in Spanish, I bet it would be horrendous. If we're being honest, I'm just excited to be talking to somebody in Mexico City, and I have somebody who watches from Dublin. This is an international audience. I'm real excited y'all are so interested in stories from California prisons. No kidding. Gotti asked the brand for some support. Like I said, I really don't know anything about that, but that's interesting. It makes sense, I suppose. If you're not recruiting, then you're not going to have a power base. I suppose it's why people would come from back east to hide out. I bet if somebody's hiding from the brand, they go back east. They go to a New York prison from California and start pretending like they're not from California. Yeah, Chowchilla was a real interesting place to do time because they had just all these little amenities. The college program there was incredible. The library was incredible. They had a theater. There are, I think, 4 yards there on Chowchilla. And there was an actual large auditorium with a projector, which was a shared facility. And once a week, each yard would have an opportunity to go and watch a movie, which the prison would buy the rights to play a film. The last one I remember playing was Dunkirk, I think. But it was pretty amazing that they had bothered to do all of those little extra things to make the place livable. I did time at a jail and 4 other pens, and I never saw any effort like that. It was a very different environment. Rikers Island, from everything I understand, is terrible. Hey, Corey, thanks for checking in. Oh, and happy birthday. Holy cow. Happy birthday to Corey. Look, I know I only got 11 people watching and 7 likes. Thanks, guys. But happy birthday to Corey from all 11 of us, man. That's cool. 1 out of 365 days is all about you. I guess probably a moneymaker for you. Thanks for being genuine. Devin, I'm working on it. It's I'm trying to keep up with things, but no, I want this to be a moneymaker. Like, if I'm being honest, this isn't my job and it's not going to be. I want to take this serious. I want to talk to as many people as I can. So I'm legitimately reaching out, and you're going to be seeing more of me and hopefully a little more professional, maybe some better thumbnails, some better editing, an outro, because I know y'all are tired of I finish talking and it immediately clicks over to some other video. I am working on those things. It's just, dad also. So we're getting there, and this is going to be a cool channel. I'm going to be doing this 5 years from now. Wait and see. New York City has a giant boat jail. No kidding. I didn't know anything about that. Hope your home is fine and the rest of your day. Hey, thanks, everyone. All right, so we're 29 minutes in, and I said I was going to try and keep this to about a half hour because I legitimately left my son playing his computer with a snack, but I'd like to keep an eye on him. Listen, Thank you for listening. I'm going to keep telling these stories, and anybody wants to weigh in on anything I should talk about, you go ahead. The idea of the other pens that I was at, that came from Dwyer Jones in the Patreon, and I appreciated the idea because it's something that I'd been meaning to talk about, and it hadn't occurred to me. So, all right, guys, you have a good night. Everybody stay safe, and really, take a moment. Don't take it for granted. How do I end the stream? All right, end stream. Now I'm out of here. See you.